This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Yo, this is Sharmane from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
Hey y'all, it's your girl Sharmane, aka Mixed Girl Main, and for this last episode of Militantly Mixed for 2018, I wanted to take an opportunity to reflect on how insane a year this has been for me since starting Militantly Mixed and ManeHustle Media, and I feel like I wouldn't be able to fully reflect on this year without being joined by the two people who have had the biggest impact on my life and what I'm doing this year for ManeHustle Media, and that is Jhavia Nicole, host of Black Radical Queer, and my partner in pod, BlerdVision from BLERDcoMIXed. So, how y'all doing?
What's upper?
Hey y'all.
So, I wanted to start off the reflections sort of episode just talking about I guess a brief recap of the ManeHustle Media, how this thing started, and then we can kind of get into it from there. So BlerdVision and I have been talking about doing something mixed race related forever, and I was living on the other side of the country, so we didn't really get things going. And then once I moved here, it still took a little while to get going. I had ended up getting a crazy job out here. I was working insane hours, and then the incident happened that ended that, and I fell into deep ass depression, and Militantly Mixed was on my mind. So I was trying to get that going while I was dealing with all my depression stuff, and it was a slow go, but it was still kind of coming together, except that BlerdVision and I couldn't get our schedules aligned. So we kind of changed what has now become BlerdcoMIXed, but was sort of the original plan for Militantly Mixed, just a couple of mixed people talking about being mixed. Into me reaching out to the internet to other mixed race people to join me on the show. And I love what that show has become, because this has been a whole different type of life-giving thing that I didn't expect. But then I got hooked back up with Jhavia. So Jhavia and I, we met through a shared Facebook community group because we're both poly, but we both got tired of that group but liked each other. So when I moved out here to LA, we met in person, and we kind of became sort of casual friends through that Facebook group. But once we started talking about doing a mental health podcast together for Black folks, and then you had your idea about Black Radical Queer, and it went from me trying to do Militantly Mixed with maybe a couple little things with mental health to now we were a network with Black Radical Queer and Militantly Mixed. And that pretty much has been a whole direction shift on my life since you got involved. So yeah, so that was my little recap of what's been going on. And between Militantly Mixed and BlerdcoMIXed and Black Radical Queer, I dug myself out of my depression and stuff like that. But it's really thanks to you two giving me a reason to do shit.
Right. That's tight. I mean, I'm glad I was able to help, even though now I know that I helped.
You did. You didn't realize it. So I've never managed to get Jhavia and BlerdVision together, but they've both been a big part of what's been going on for ManeHustle Media and for myself. So this is actually the first time you've even had to have interacted.
That is correct.
I mean, I've listened. Yeah.
Eventually, I wanted to do some sort of podcast network for people of color, but that was sort of in the far distance. And then Jhavia and I hooked back up, and we were talking about maybe doing something about mental health for people, for Black women, really, mostly. And then Jhavia had the idea of Black Radical Queer, and within a month, it went from I'm trying to do Militantly Mixed to now we've started a network, and Militantly Mixed and Black Radical Queer launched at the same time. And pretty much for me, my life totally changed. My whole direction, my whole attitude, everything picked up and changed at that point. What about you, Jhavia? you're the one that changed everything for me, so I don't know.
I think that for me, I'm very much, well, in this particular regard, very much a stereotypical Aries in terms of if I say I'm going to do something, I'm just like dive in head first. May or may not have a life jacket. It's just, it just depends. But for the most part, like if I'm saying, hey, this is what I want to do, like I have this vision, then I'm like, let's get it. Like I'm not gonna like go back and forth or like kind of leave you hanging and stuff like that. And so when we were talking about the podcast and I was like, hey, I have this vision for something I want to do. I'm not sure what format I want it to be. I'm not sure if I want it to be like a YouTube channel or internet radio or podcast, whatever. I just wasn't sure, blog, or I was just I had the concept, but not the format. And my wife was like, oh, maybe you should do a podcast. I was like, I'll think about it. But once we start talking about it, I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I feel like it's aligned with what you're interested in doing. So here's what I can do. Like, here's what I can bring to the table to try to like, not just do what I want to do, but like also support, your endeavor. And once I said it, I'm just like, hey, okay, so you starting this like tomorrow or not? Like,
no joke. It was crazy because you were like, okay, let's do it, and it was like, yeah, let's do it. And then 5 minutes later, she's like, so I already got 24 people booked. I don't know if that's too fast.
It was like, 24 hours. My first month, like I had all my first month of like for July, I had all of July's people basically within 24 hours. I was like, if we're
crazy.
I was like, oh yeah, let me. So I was posting Militantly Mixed on like all my social media and stuff. I'm like, yeah. So what else we need to do? Sharmane's like, oh well, damn.
Yeah, I was like, I'm sitting there. I was just thinking, like, this is just something I want to do, and I think I wasn't my normal like fire under my ass type of self because I had just been dealing with like the roughest year I'd had in a long time, and so I was letting it just go, like it's gonna happen, and then Jhavia made me not casual real fast, and within a month, it was no joke. We went from talking about it to about a month later, we were already launched and going. That's
just how I roll, like for real. If I'm saying, hey, we're gonna do this, like,
so for people on Militantly Mixed, if they don't know Jhavia as well, if they're not listening to Black Radical Queer, they should be. But she is all about Black women before everything. And if a Black woman is in need, Jhavia is there and getting her what she needs. I don't know what kind of magic you have going on. And I hope you have even a fourth of what you give to others from the other Black women in your life too. But yeah, this was gonna happen, but it was gonna be way slower if Jhavia didn't get involved.
Shit, I need a little something. I need a little some of that because that's how we are sometimes. We're just like, you know what? Yeah, maybe if you want to, and then we can.
That's the worst part of yours and my relationship because we're like, we got all kind of ideas, and we're here to support. We're like, yeah, you should do that. Like, yeah, you should do that. But neither one of us have like cracked the whip on each other, and we've been trying to do it. And I think we are kind of getting better about that now, especially once we got BlerdVision BlerdCOMIXed going. Plus, we've been seeing each other in person more often, which is, I think, another thing that kind of makes it more real too, to actually be in each other's physical space and stuff.
I mean, it's good to bounce those ideas off of someone, and I mean, I like being able to do that too. But I am very much a starter. Like, I don't know. I like if I'm really like into something, anything that I have some type of like for real interest in, then I'm all for like going for it. And then too, especially if you're like cool with someone, like you all kind of bouncing ideas off each other. I'm that person who's like, do that shit,
Yeah.
Go for it. Why not? Like, I feel like that's, we have why not go after, what it is that you actually want to do? Because sometimes we just we slow ourselves down or we talk ourselves out of stuff just because we're either nervous or we feel like, oh, it seems like too big. And I like breaking stuff down into smaller goals so that it seems more attainable. So it's like having a podcast, it might have initially seemed like, or having a network may have seemed like, dang, it's a little like down the line. But I'm like, okay, what's the first thing? Let's get these social media handles. Let's promote, let's do the, so I just break it down so that it's more attainable. So I'm like, okay, here's my little checklist. What else we got to do? All right, bet. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll talk to you in about 2 hours. I haven't done it.
Actually, that is how you are. It's legit. If I'm like, hey, I got this idea, we should do this and stuff, and you're like, okay, well, let me sit on it for a minute, and then 5 minutes later, you've already contacted 47 people, and you got things scheduled, and you're like, how far in advance can I schedule this out? What's your life like right now?
Real. I'm like, look, I'm doing my scheduling for January of 2019, so I got my outline. I believe in outlines. I'm like, here go my little checklist. I talk to this person and that person. What we got to do? Okay. Like legit, y'all, for real, my 2019 is like a big chunk of it is already planned out.
Damn.
Yeah. Oh, shit, I don't even know what I'm having for dinner.
I know, right?
Even though I don't know that, though. That's the thing. He's like,
okay, the little things.
She's got the big things all checked out. No, right. I mean, for me, and maybe this is just a little self-indulgent of an episode, but, you know, it's my show, who cares? The biggest part for me is like acknowledging the people that do have an impact. And I've gone a few years, like I've been lucky in my life to have some of the people who have influenced me and helped me and supported me here and there. But then I've had these big patches of like the people you expect or should be the ones out there for you aren't the ones out there for you. And for it to come in these unexpected places, like Jhavia and I, we met through Facebook like 5 or 6 years ago. And maybe there was 1 or 2 messages here and there we liked of each other, and then we liked each other's messages enough to friend each other casually on Facebook, you know. Still not a whole lot of engagement or whatever. But once we realized things were aligning in such a way that we were both moving to LA around the same time, we're like, you know, why not? Let's meet in person. Let's become friends. And even still, like, it's weird to think, I don't know how you feel, Jhavia, but it's weird to think of like how close I feel that we are now, given how weird it is that we met in this random poly group. You know, like, you know, it's like we know a lot about each other's lives now. Obviously, we're business partners to a degree. You know, we're engaged in this business thing together, and so we have like responsibilities to each other to keep this going. But we also have like a genuine, we're accountable to each other. But we have like a genuine respect and care about what's going on in each other's lives and stuff like that. So to think that we have the relationship we have, given how we would have met, is very strange. And then like BlerdVision and I, we met in 4th grade, and then I moved in 6th grade back to Long Beach, and we didn't engage again until high school. And then, I mean, do you remember if we even talked that much in high school? I mean, maybe here and there. We had like 1 class together.
Right. Yeah, it was here and there. We never not, you know, like we were always like cool.
We always,
you know what I'm saying, because of our shared past and everything. And
yeah, and then again, like same type of thing. Years go by, we don't engage, and then Facebook and MySpace exist, and we connect again. And when we started talking again, it was really like, you know, a mixed race comfort zone. It was like, hey, you're mixed like me, let's talk about this. And it was sharing articles or having different conversations. And then eventually it was like, we got to do something together because we've known each other forever. And I would say once we started seeing each other and hanging out again, it wasn't like much time has passed. Like you feel this weird sense of knowing each other well, even though we've had big chunks of our lives where we didn't really know each other.
Right. But I mean, and it always was kind of like when we saw each other after you came back from being on the East Coast, when you came back, when we sat and we just had lunch, and it was like, boom. It was like we were back in, you know, kicking it. You know what I'm saying? It was no
clowning on each other.
So, you know, so it was perfectly, you know, that way. So it was kind of like, all right, yeah, this is the person I want to do some things with. I mean, I can trust them because we have that shared background and we have that shared history, and it's easy to be around the other person, and it is what it is, you know, and they just jumped off.
It's also funny when, like, in these moments, because sometimes podcasting, you can be, like, oddly open, you know, like, weirdly transparent, even though you're talking into a microphone. And then if you're the one I'm talking to and I say something about, oh, when I was a kid, blah, 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 and then you can clown me on it because you saw it in action, that stuff, like, comes out of nowhere. And like, it's a surprise. You're like, oh yeah, shit, I gotta own that because you know that about me.
Because you know the background. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But you've called me out on something like, well, I don't know about that because of this, and you'll be like, yeah, you know what, I gotta own that. You know?
That's true. Yeah. So that part's been fun, and I will say, like, I've made my life really small over the last couple years because the bigger it got, the harder it was I was able to track who to trust and who I was safe with. You know, I've had a couple years of finding out I wasn't safe with a lot of different people. And so like right now my world is pretty small, and the two of you are kind of the biggest parts of it right now because we have a weekly connection. At some point I talk to each one of you every week, not a week goes by. And we've had, you know, some of us have had, I mean, we haven't had any beef together yet, so that's good. But like, we've had things with other people. We've talked to other people about.
Not
like,
yet. Wait, are you anticipating?
No, I mean, I'm sorry. No, I'm just,
but you know,
I'm just like,
if you want to pop off.
No, I ain't got nothing. I ain't got nothing. I promise. It's just
like, I see how it is.
I'm just that kind of person.
I'm learning something on this episode.
No.
Keep an eye out, girl. Keep an eye out.
No, I'm just saying, like, we haven't had it yet, as in, like, yeah, well, okay, maybe I'm a pessimistic person, and that's the way I word things. But, like, we haven't had any beef throughout this process, which is awesome. Damn it. See, now I feel like I dug myself into a hole.
Beef right now.
Right?
Beef and anticipating beef.
See, you see how things switch up on you so fast.
Right. You did not stop. You were like, hey, I scheduled that shit. They was like, boop, right to it.
Right. It was all a minute ago, literally.
Oh no! See, this is my negative way of talking. That like Tree gets on me about this all the time. That I always have like a negative view on something, and.
Courtney tells the same thing. She says the way that I speak is like, it's like she says like say for instance if you enjoy something like or I try something, I'm like, oh, that's not bad, instead of saying it's good. Like I never recognized that. She pointed that out to me. I'm like, forget you for noticing.
Right?
Dang, I didn't know.
I'm like that too. There's this thing on the iPhone that if someone sends you a picture or a voice message or something like that, you can keep it, like, so you can like click a button to keep it. And then it tells the person that sent it to you that they kept it. And so my view of that, I was like, what are you keeping from me? Like, I was like, why is iPhone telling me you're keeping this from me? What are you keeping from me? And he was like, what are you talking about? Because he was viewing it as he saved it, he kept it. And I'm reading it as you were about to send me something and then you kept it from me.
From you, yeah.
I understand in hindsight how ridiculous my reading of that was. But in the moment, I was hella defensive thinking he's trying to hide some shit, and just that was a moment.
Listeners, now you see how the beef gets started. So you learning something about me.
Right.
Okay?
Yep. But I think I do that same thing. I was like, I don't hate that.
Right.
I don't hate it. Yeah. Well, what is that? Like, is that a black thing? Like, is that because we're just so used to disappointment that we're just like,
dang,
waiting?
Because I never heard a white person say, I'm not mad at that. Because I say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely.
So maybe.
I don't know. Dang. Why you got to make about race, Sharmane?
I mean, legit, my whole life is about race. I have a podcast network that has 2 mixed race shows and 1 black as fuck show. So race is pretty much my whole life.
Divisive. You know you're being divisive, making everything about it. You have a divisive network. Oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, someone said that to me on social media at some point where it was one of those like podcaster support groups, and I was saying, they were like, well, what are you know, it's like, post here about what your thing is. And so I was like, you know, I own ManeHustle Media. I'm trying to get it off the ground. It's a podcast network for POC created creators. It doesn't necessarily have to be POC related or race related content, but the podcaster does have to be. And someone was like, well, why can't it be anybody? And I'm like, because anybody can do something else somewhere else. But in my case, like,
damn,
you know, I mean, shit, like, if that's not the realest way of saying it,
somewhere else.
I mean, like, my whole idea behind Main Hustle, and even in trying to figure out in the naming of it what it was going to be, whether or not it implied that it was for people of color. And I only use people of color just because I'm not full black, but implying that it was for people of color, or should I just make it, more connected to anything that I loved or anything that was related to me? And my whole life motto since I've become an adult has been trying to turn whatever my side hustle was into my main hustle. And main hustle came out of that. And Jhavia is actually, you were part of me finally, nailing down that name. It's like, I like this name, but I was listening to people who weren't black, I guess, that were viewing the word hustle as negative, and it took my black guru here, Jhavia, to be like, fuck them. She's like, listen to yourself. Like you're telling yourself that this is your thing. This is your thing. Just do it. And it really did. Like, so it wasn't just that like we created a couple things together. It was that you were the one out there cheerleading the ideas I was having, and even when I was allowing myself to second guess myself, that was a big part of making that transition.
Someone else tell you, it's like, you are Sharmane, you are Mane, so it's like it makes sense for it to be Main Hustle. So it's, to me, it's just it's so logical that I don't understand how anyone would have an issue with it. But I'm just like, it makes sense. So if you don't get, I get it. If you don't get it, that's fine. But just because you don't get it doesn't mean that it's wrong. Like, it's because ultimately it's not about anybody else. It has to be what resonates with you for your shit, your network.
And what's funny about that is that I can be that person in almost every other respect except for where it's about taking care of myself. So that's the 40-year-old lesson I'm trying to come up to. It's like in the workplace, you couldn't see any self-doubt or anything in me. I was confident. I knew what I was doing. I asked for help when I didn't understand something. I was comfortable in not knowing things. I could ask those questions, blah, blah, blah. But to do something for myself, it was always, the kind of stuff that people naturally doubt. Like, will it be good enough? Will it connect to more people? And deciding what is the real goal for this. And ultimately, I finally came to it. And part of that had to do with conversations with both you guys is coming to the point of like, as hard as it was for me to do something like this, it's make it for you first and let that be the major goal. And if it happens to spill out in other ways, great. And so that helped because I finally, like, what was I missing? I was missing connection about mixedness. And, besides my, handful of friends, BlerdVision's the only one I talk to about this stuff regularly. But, a couple things here and there, whatever. But it was an absence that I wanted to talk about. I wanted and did it. So I created the show for me. And then it just so happens as it grew, it became this other monster. And so now I have this. Well, I love it. First of all, there's that still is happening. But now I have this, what feels like an obligation or responsibility to the people that it's affecting to be like, oh, you're being affected by this the way I'm being affected by this. I need to keep doing this for you and for me. And so now it's a bigger thing.
If it resonates, my thing is, if it resonates with you, then because, there are some things that I feel like nothing is new, like in terms of the human experience. I mean, there are different variations of things and different manifestations, but nothing is like 100% new. So if it resonates with you, then it's guaranteed that it's going to, resonate with someone else. And I just had to, I was talking to a friend of mine about that because I always say my first love is poetry. I write poetry. And so she was like, oh, would you consider like, publishing things or just about talking about like exposure and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I'll write for me. Like if it resonates with other people, that's fantastic. And it's very humbling, like to know that people like connect with my words or whatever. But first and foremost, like it's for me. It's like my outlet or whatever. And so with doing the podcast, I approached it the same way. It's like, what do I want to see? So when you were talking about doing Militantly Mixed and having like those doubts, I'm just like, I guarantee, like guarantee 110%. Like if it's something you're thinking about or it's something that resonates with you, absolutely other people, you may not know how many, but other people are going to connect with it because it's not new, like it's unique, but it's not a new thing. Like there, you have a community out there that you just haven't connected with yet. And this is kind of like your conduit to do so. So we
Yeah.
kind of just, can hinder ourselves with the doubt and stuff like that. And it's natural. I mean, it is what it is, but it's very like if it, connects with you and it's something you're thinking about, then, it's very, very likely that you're not the only one.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, and a lot of artists, like in music and every really thing, they say do it for yourself, because other people will like it, because it's, and if it comes from the heart, you're going to feel that, and there's going to be people that it resonates with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that too, I mean, you doing it coming from a genuine place. Because honestly, there are plenty of folks, like, I may not have had the same experience as them, but I love when people do things that they're passionate about and that really resonate with them and that are so like genuine and authentic. That piece, like that authenticity and that passion, are always gonna resonate with me. Unless you're like a passionate bigot, like,
I mean, that still resonates with someone, but
if you're like,
we have to be inclusive, remember?
Right. But that passion and that authenticity is going to resonate with me, even if it's not something I'm well versed in. Like, I'm not, super well versed in like comics or anything like that. Like, I'm kind of like newer to the, to the scene or whatever. But if I know that you're into it, I'm going to be excited regardless, even if I don't have a lot of knowledge about it, because that, knowing that it comes from your heart and that it means a lot to you, that is that genuine, that kind of like universal thing that connects with people. So that's why people who are not Black, radical, and queer can listen to my podcast, and I be wilding. And I'm like, y'all still listen to me? And I'm so unapologetic, but I think that's why. Because they're like, hey, she crazy, but she gonna be herself.
Right.
That's perfect.
So
well, I got a dip, but it was lovely being with you two smart ladies, and we're gonna have to do this again, because I just would love sitting here hearing you guys and saying stuff. You know what I mean?
I've been wanting to get the three of us together, because the three of us are ManeHustle Media legit right now. We are the three. So we're the superhero trinity.
I'll say the trinity.
There we go.
So yeah. All right. Go ahead and take off. I'll chat with you later. All right, so that was Christmas Time at Hollis, Queens. A shout out to BlerdVision, his favorite holiday song. But right now, I am joined with return guest Gretchen Erickson from the Am I Even Allowed to Call Myself Mixed episode. With Gretchen, she is also someone that I went to high school with, although we didn't know each other in high school. But we connected through a high school group about her coming on the show. And at the time that we spoke, we talked about how because she is so white presenting, she wasn't necessarily comfortable in her mixed ass skin. And then we had this amazing 3-hour and 4-minute conversation. And the only reason why I know that is because I'm looking at the Skype window and it says that's how long we talked. And most of which the audience didn't get to hear because we just talked about, I just put in the stuff about us the mixed stuff that we talked about. But so how has your mixed ass life been since you've been on the show? Let's talk about it.
It's been good. It's funny. I think one of the biggest impacts, and I think you've alluded to this before, is just allowing myself to be called mixed, to be given a space at the table and to speak up about it. And I think one of my hesitations before was that one of the biggest impacts to my life is being able to claim that seat at the table of being mixed and allowing myself to claim it. Before, I wasn't hiding that I was mixed as much as I didn't think I deserved to be called mixed, I guess. I didn't, feel validated in that part of my life, or that I was dark enough. And a lot of it really is a color thing, because I am so very white, whiter than my 100% white husband, so very pale. I know. I just didn't think I deserved it, I guess.
Yeah.
But since our interview, since listening to the podcast every week and talking more openly about it, now I'm more able to approach people. There's a younger guy who's does reception at my kid's pediatrician, and I've noticed him several times take my kids in, and he's clearly a mixed guy. And I just went up to him. I was checking out one time, and I said, "You need to listen to this podcast." I said,
Awesome.
"It's about being mixed." And I said, "I'm mixed too." And it kind of first, I think he looked at me like, "Why are you telling me this, lady?" And we've chatted. It's not like I'm a complete stranger, but I said, "I'm mixed. I'm part Hispanic." And he just kind of warmed up, like, "Okay, let me write that down." And so maybe I got you another listener,
cute.
but. But I guess I've been just more comfortable in claiming it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially hearing so many other guests talk about that same feeling of not knowing where they belonged in being mixed, and what areas they were allowed to claim, whether it was people that presented a lot more Black than white, being able to say, "Hey, I'm also part white," or those who are more ambiguous and claiming, "Hey, I'm whatever mixedness they are." Mm-hmm. And I guess I've also been a lot more aware of race and identity in the bigger broader media. I keep sending you.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've been really investigative since we talked. There's a lot of emails back and forth of like, "Hey, this came up," or "I saw this article," or "What about this book?" And so I definitely feel like your investigativeness coming.
I just notice it more. It's just some of those things that once you're attuned to it, that you just see it more.
Yeah.
And I guess I never really thought about it before, but I've always been interested in race and identity, but I couldn't pinpoint why. And now I've got a name for it. It's because I'm mixed, and it's because it's something that's part of me. It's not just as an ally. And I do, because I am so white, I still have to consider myself more an ally in the broader conversation.
Yeah, I understand that.
But I can be closer to that and have maybe a stronger voice. And again, put myself to the table where before I would have shied away. It's not my place. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's actually something, and actually because of our discussion, I've been able to sort of use that part of our conversation in conversations I've had with other guests that some of those episodes haven't aired yet, of people that have a similar situation to you where they're either super, super ambiguous, or they just look like a race that they're not mixed with, or they look very white presenting, or whatever the case is. And their whole thing of like, am I even allowed to speak is such a common thing that comes from them. And if they have heard your episode, they're like, oh, and then I heard this episode with your white passing guest and blah 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 blah, you know. So it ends up being something that it's actually like something I can use to talk to other people, whether it's on the episode or to encourage them to come on the show and share their mixed story. Because, you know, just like you were saying when we first started talking, you're like, I don't even know if I think you had said something to me like you were definitely curious and you were going to start listening to the show, but you didn't even know if you had a place to talk about it. And since then, I think I've seen more in terms of your social media posts. You're more embracing of it, and also our exchanges that we're having. But then there was that cute little quiz or that face recognition quiz that actually put you as having a Chilean looking face. And I was like, well, hey, that borders Peru.
I was so excited for that. You know, this little those lame Facebook quizzes, let's analyze something. And I'm sure it's, you know, really dumb, but it's super lame and validating. It said I look Latin. Yeah. I'm so proud.
So I got Colombian, which I was surprised about because normally I get like Puerto Rican or Dominican, like in person. That's what people think. And so Colombian, I was like, well, it's still Latin, and that's what people think I am. But when you got a bordering, not just a Latin country, but a bordering country to your own, that's I was like, hey.
And I think a lot of times people, you know, especially white people, that don't really don't have to think about race at all. Right. The people that that's not on their radar because it's not in their everyday life that they have to think, oh, I'm white all the time. You know, I shared, you know, that I was on a podcast about mixed race, and I'd show them pictures. This is my family. And one lady's like, oh, your grandmother looks Italian. Are you Italian? And I'm like, she's not just here. No. So it's what they don't know, especially what Latin America looks like. They think Mexico.
Right.
And then that she doesn't look Mexican. So Latin America is, you know, like America, like the United States of America it's a lot of different people. Yeah. So, and it's just going to have a rainbow of colors. But anyway, I've been a lot more aware of where I am and just the broader conversation. It's been nice, and I think the biggest difference, I remember the very first time we talked, or even before we actually spoke on the phone, it was when we were still communicating like on a Facebook post or something, and I was talking to my husband like, I've been asked to go on this podcast about being mixed, and I'm is it stupid? I think I want to do it, and he looked at me, he's like, Gretchen, you are mixed, and I'm doing it now. I'm choked up, and I was like, I just never heard that validation that yes, you are. You're allowed to claim it. You're allowed to embrace that side. And because I didn't have that immersion in the culture, I didn't have the experience living in the country, didn't have the language. I just didn't feel like I had a place. And now I realize mixedness is its own place, and that's what I have.
Yeah. And that's awesome. I'm glad that you do feel that way now. And so like you were kind of a project for me once we first started talking because you were and it's not that you were resistant because you didn't want to accept it. You were resistant because you wanted it so much to be able to be a part of it.
It's one of those things like I don't know how to describe it. Like you want something, but you don't think you deserve it. I didn't feel like I deserved it. And being just given that opportunity to say, yes, you are, and from an outside source, and not just me trying to like be a poser or just trying to adopt somebody else's culture.
Right.
No, it is part of my culture too. So I guess that's what I really had the biggest impact.
I'm really glad that that's where you came to. And more than that you're continuing to be investigative, that it's not just this thing that's like, oh, now I got my little badge and I'm walking around with it now, but that you're actually like, like I can see that you're actually trying to get in there. And I think one of the things that I've discovered over the last 6 months in doing the show is with every person I speak to, I realize how much more I have in common with any mixed person than I may have in common with somebody from a monoracial person from one of the ethnicities that I actually have. Mm-hmm. And that's because, you know, while we can bond on certain cultural aspects of it, I won't fully know their experience and they won't fully know my experience. But another mixed person would be like, oh yeah, I know exactly what it's like not feeling fully enough of one or the other, or not feeling like I get to claim this because the roll of the dice in my DNA made me yellow instead of black, you know, or whatever it is for mm-hmm. other people. And that's just so common amongst all of us that that's been really validating. And the funny thing is, like, in comparison, I haven't felt like I've needed as much validation. Like, I've been walking around mixed for most of my, you know, my whole life, walking around like, mm-hmm. I'm mixed. But there are those moments when you hear somebody else say what you feel or what you think, and you're like, oh.
Yes, that's me too. And it's like, and I guess that mixedness in and of itself is its own like subculture. Like you said, you can relate to people that have completely different backgrounds, but they're mixed and you're mixed. Yeah. And there's a lot of same experiences and feelings. That's what's amazing to me. All these, and it's across, you know, the globe. Right. And that woman from, you know, from the other side of the world, and Ethiopia.
Yeah, and
that's amazing.
She actually messaged me today to say Merry Christmas, and I'd let her know that.
Oh, that's sweet.
You know, hers is actually one of the other highest downloaded episodes, and that, you know, made her really excited too. And she's like, it's just nice also to have that experience, like once you've had this like really deeply emotional, because it's weird how emotional this gets with strangers. Yeah. Like, you know, I mean, we happen to at least kind of had a cursory knowledge of each other, but like other people that I've spoken to, they're complete strangers to me. And within minutes, you know, we're already sharing some really heavily emotional stuff with each other. And it's just, I don't know, it's just nice. It really does feel like finding your tribe and like, you know, building that tribe up a little bit more, so that you're not, I think a lot of us always say is that we experience so much loneliness.
Yeah, it's isolating in a lot of ways because, again, you don't fit in one or the other. They're just always going to feel a little bit different.
Yeah. And while I know that there are aspects of different cultures that we're mixed with that can be very welcoming, at the end of the day, there's always going to be that one thing of like, well, you don't really get this fully because blah, blah, blah. But I know that I could turn to any person that I've had on the show so far, and hopefully any of the future mixed people that end up coming on, and be like, gosh, this happened to me today. And they'll be like, oh, you know, that's happened to me too, you know, and we just get that bond. And I really do love that. So I'm glad.
I get because I am obviously so very pale, even for a white person. I mean, obviously no one can tell that I'm mixed at all. So I get a lot more people feeling they can be racist around me, and especially talk about immigration. And I'm like, my mother was an immigrant. Yeah. And they kind of backpedal a little bit, but I usually don't say anything, especially if they're going to go on a rant about something. But
well, you have to consider your safety, because in some cases people are willing to cause harm.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually like online type stuff, but I don't usually engage anyway. Just if somebody has a mindset, that's fine. But it surprises me even within my own family. Yeah. Those that are so anti-immigration. I mean, you realize that we're one generation away from immigrants, and it baffles my mind. And maybe it's a colorism thing. I don't know. I recall one of my cousins a long time ago talking about the Mexicans. I'm like, your mother literally became a citizen like 5 years ago.
No. Yeah, definitely that runs in my family too. And it's just like the blindness that goes into that kind of thinking is amazing.
But I don't know. I think I'm a lot more aware just in general now, because then I had buried it for so long until recently. So it's been nice. I've been really enjoying the last 6 months listening to your podcasts, all of them.
Well, I appreciate it. I definitely I definitely feel the support from you because I see you sharing it and talking to people and jumping in on conversations and stuff. So I love that part too, is not only did we get a chance to have this conversation a while back, but that we've had this continued interaction with each other, which I have with some of my guests, not all of my guests. So I do appreciate you coming back. And I think it really fits the whole idea of what this episode is for reflecting, because of any of our guests, probably you had a pretty big arc, like a big mixed race arc in this year of besides just listening, but also participating and embracing your own mixedness.
Yeah, no, I've had a big year personally in my identity and who I am as a person, and race was a big part of that. Being embracing my mother's culture and heritage, and it was a really big part of that, and I appreciate it, really, your support and finding this podcast and being able to listen and feel like I can join in.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Thanks for coming back also.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, so that is Christina Aguilera's version of the Reflection song from the Mulan movie. I first downloaded this song to put on the show kind of because BlerdVision is a Disney dude. And since we were talking about reflecting on the year for the last thing, I thought reflections and Disney, whatever. But after listening to it and the second part of the episode that I just did with Gretchen, it's actually a song that really fits this episode pretty well. So thank you to Jhavia Nicole and BlerdVision for their participation and support in ManeHustle Media and putting our shows together this last 6 months. Thank you to Gretchen for coming back on this episode to share her experience of what it's been like to discover her mixedness, or own her mixedness, I guess, since we first spoke. And just thank you to the audience, everybody who has supported the show from the beginning, people who are picking it up and sharing it. We have had a recent boom in downloads, so I know it's getting out there. We're also getting picked up in many more countries than we ever did before, a lot more in South America and Africa now, and the Middle East, which is pretty awesome. So I'll just end on this note that I'm just very grateful for the experience of being able to produce this show, to all the mixed race people that have joined me for an episode and been willing to share their stories. Grateful to the sponsors who have continued to support the show and help us pay for our hosting, and the people that donated to the birthday fundraiser this year. It's just, I know that we're going to keep going and growing, and this next year will be a whole lot more of mixedness and ManeHustle Media growing into a more sustainable business. If you would like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/militantlymixed for a monthly sponsorship. We have different reward levels depending on what you donate at. And if you would like to hit us with a one-time donation, you can go to paypal.me/militantlymixed. You can also support us by listening to all the other shows and sharing them with your friends. Black Radical Queer with Jhavia Nicole, her shows airs on Wednesdays. And BlerdcoMIXed with myself and BlerdVision airs on Thursdays. So that's it for 2018, y'all. Don't forget to be your mixed ass self. Bye. Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle Media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Sharmane Johnson. Music is by David Bogan, The One. And if you like what you heard on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and wherever you find your podcasts. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.